Welcome, listeners, to the Third Pint
Kia
Theory.
ora.
Kia ora, Martin Bridges. How are you?
I am good. I had a rather, um, I would say, I was going to say disappointing weekend, but it actually turned into a pleasant weekend. It was not the weekend I had planned.
Yes, we'll go into that very long and gruesome story in a minute. But uh, your listeners, you are on a beer podcast. Just in case you're wondering, we had. It's not a travel broadcast, but podcast, but it does involve Martin's unfortunate travel experiences last weekend, where he failed to get to Winter Ales in Wellington. Um, Maybe we should start there. We were going to talk about the Smith's IPA Challenge in Queenstown before we get to our guest. Since we've set it up now, Martin, I think you were messaging me through the course of the day. And for people, if you're far enough removed from the last Friday in June, or if you're not in New Zealand and don't remember it, it was one of just those bad weather days that New Zealand gets, where it was blowing an absolute southerly gale through Wellington. We got a bit of it here in New Plymouth. There were I saw a house where the solar panels had blown off the roof and had landed on the house next door, which is not nice. But and it was much worse in Wellington. And you were trying to get to Wellington, Martin. So what happened?
Yeah, well, because I live in quite away from the airport, I had to leave fairly early. So I left my house at 5:30 in the morning for a 7:30 flight, and at 6 o'clock they cancelled it. And then offered me an alternative of flying to Nelson and then from Nelson to Wellington, which didn't sound particularly appealing, but because I was going down not only for the Winter Ales Festival, but also to record a couple of interviews for this podcast and to have a discussion with Josh from Garage Project about something else.
Yeah.
I was determined to get there, but by 2 o'clock in the afternoon, they had decided that not only was I was not going to be going to Wellington on Friday, and that the earliest they could offer me a flight was on Sunday morning, which would have meant I would have flown down on Sunday morning and flown back on Sunday afternoon, which did seem rather pointless.
So yeah, we both missed going to Winter Ales. My story is a bit more prosaic. My cat went in on Wednesday to have a wee operation, slightly unexpected. But she had to have a lump taken out of her head, and yeah, she needed meds and looking after. So so both of us on the sidelines for what looked like a really good festival. So congratulations to Dave and Denise for what looks like a great success from the distance at which we were observing it. The other thing that we should probably talk about is the Smith's IPA Challenge, which has landed between podcasts. You and I have both travelled down for that event in the past, and it's great. It's like there are so many beers. I think again 33 because they take the entrance to match the number of taps at Smith's in Queenstown. But the judges, it was quite an interesting year, I think, because the top three would be not the three names that you'd immediately think are going to finish on the top on the podium. You know, we're used to seeing Parrot Dog and Good George. I'm trying to think someone else that's a regular there.
Behemoth have won it in the past.
Yeah. Bach Brewing has done well there, which we're going to talk to about Batch later on. But yeah, so number one,
Duncan's took it out last year.
Oh, Duncan's, yeah. But anyway, it was Thief Brewing in collaboration with Be Effect and Brew Moon, a
Mm.
three-way collab that came out on top with a beer called Lunar Effect, which is going to get packaged. Twofold from Auckland were second, and Canyon Brewing, local brewery in Queenstown, were third, and Neck of the Woods, who we've hosted on this podcast, took out the People's
Mm.
Choice ahead of Element from Nelson. And just mention Renaissance with a beer called Kaleidoscope took out the Hop Growers Award, and Sprig and Fern won the label design. And you've had a couple of these beers because you drowned your travel sorrows by going
Yeah.
to, yeah.
I decided that since I'd been unable to go to Wellington and drink lovely winter ales, that I would go to Twofold in Auckland for an event they were having on Friday night, which was kind of a northern road show for the Smiths IPA
Yeah,
Challenge. So they
good
had
idea.
six
Yeah.
of the beers, including their own, obviously, which was a runner-up. And which was an excellent beer. They also had the Element, which was the runner-up in the People's Choice, and that was another excellent beer. So yeah, it was a nice event. I'm glad I was able to go, but I would have been happier if I hadn't been able to go. If you see what I mean.
Yeah, I do. Look, I think it was a really good story with that Thief beer, because I did catch up with Steve Gebby, who's the founder of Thief, and just talked a little bit about it. And it's sort of more interested in how the collab came about, which was that it's all tied to a guy called Andy Duke, who's the head brewer at Be Effect, but who used to brew at Brew Moon. So there's a connection between those two breweries. And when Thief were looking for a brewer, it was Andy who recommended a brewer who used to work at Be Effect called Ethan Bomar. And so he's now the brewer at Thief. So Andy has pulled together these three strands, and they enter a collab every year. But different brewery brews it, and so this year it was Thief's turn. So that's how that came about. And I mentioned in my Friday night beers that that Andy had been a mentor to Ethan, who's a young fella, and Andy messaged me and he said, "You got it the wrong way round, mate. I've learnt more from him than I've taught him," which is interesting, And
Mm.
he's got a food science background, and I think Andy could have a point, because there's some really cool beers coming out of Thief Brewing in Christchurch. So they're just one to watch, I think. And
Mm.
yeah,
Certainly
yeah.
sounds like it. I look forward to trying it when it gets packaged.
Mm.
What I thought was interesting at the Twofold event on Friday was that the six beers they had were all clear,
Ah,
and
yeah.
um, talking to some of the brewers who judged uh, at the Smith's IPA Challenge, they said that in general, I think clear beers were in the majority.
Interesting. Yeah.
Although the overall champion was a hazy,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
it was quite interesting. I think, that those six were all clear.
Mm, mm. The other thing I noted when I was just looking at the tap list, that I don't think there was one of them below like 6.8%, which is I don't know. I don't know why they all have to be such big ABVs, but maybe when you're piling a whole lot of hops in to try and win an event, it has to be a big beer. So yeah. Anyway, I digress.
Well, going from high ABVs
Yes.
to no ABVs,
Yeah.
I think is probably the segue that we should be looking for
I
as we
wasn't
get
aiming
into.
for it, but I obviously landed it with aplomb. Um, so yes, if you're paying attention, you'll see that this is landing first week in dry July. Have you ever done dry July, Martin?
I have not. I
You've
don't
not.
do anything where anybody tells me that I have to do it at a particular time.
So the first time I ever did it, I actually did it in June, bizarrely, because I was working at the Sunday Star Times and they wanted a story on Dry July for July. And I don't know, it was just one of those setups. Do it in June so you can write about it, so we can have it ready for July. Anyway, yeah, it wasn't, I didn't enjoy it, put it that way. And this was a long, long time ago. And after orange juice and lime and soda and whatever, it was just like, but I have made sort of small attempts since then to go long periods without, not necessarily associated with dry July, but I'm going to give it another go this year, I think. And I have a fridge loaded with all sorts of non-alcoholic beers. So yeah, I will keep you posted on how it goes. I'm not doing it for any fundraising thing. I think there's usually a fundraiser, but
Mm.
it's just a test of my own resilience. But what I think has happened since I did that first one way back in the day is there are now way more options.
Oh yeah,
It's unbelievable how many more options we have. Yeah, and
yeah, absolutely. I like it. It is doable now. I think yes. In the past, I would have really struggled,
mm,
but I remember batch all day IPA was probably the first sensible, actually tastes like beer,
yeah,
non-alcoholic beer that I tried, and I remember it's probably 3 or 4 years ago now, that I went to a barbecue with a 6 pack of all day and happily drank those and thought, yeah, this actually works.
yeah,
It
yeah,
tastes like beer. It looks like beer.
yeah,
Um, um, and it is just it was a great thing to drink on a sunny day.
yeah. So that's a good point. Like years ago, if you just turned up to something, if you didn't want to drink and you have soft drink, there was that FOMO, like you sort of did feel like you were missing out. But I think if you actually have a thing that looks like a beer, feels like a beer,
Mm.
other people might perceive it as a beer. Yeah, you just feel better about it. It makes that whole missing out much easier. And I think, Batch, there's a lot of credit to them because, and I talked to Craig about this in the interview about, you know, they were first in that craft space. And with that comes a risk,
Yeah,
that if you're not good, then what will it mean? So with a lot of innovation, sometimes it's better to be second in
yeah.
some ways.
Fast
But
forward.
anyway, yeah, and luckily they landed it. That beer from the get go was really good, and it was a game changer. And before long, Garage Project were out with Tiny, and then just boom, 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 a whole lot more come out. And but yeah, Craig's got to take a lot of credit for being daring enough to go there and with the crew at Steam Brewing to get it right, from the get go. Yeah.
Mm.
So I think the other thing worth noting about Batch is a little bit of a backstory there, and it sort of Craig nearly skipped over it, but it's his connection to Limburg,
Mm.
which I think is also interesting. And we do draw that out in the interview, but for a lot of craft beer people, and you may have arrived in New Zealand maybe just as Limburg was maybe starting to go out. I think I'm trying to
Yeah, I
get the
think I
years
caught
right.
the tail end of it. I remember drinking Limburg Hopsmacker,
Mm,
as a really great beer, in 2007.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
but they weren't around for that much longer after
No,
that.
no. I think I missed them. I arrived in back in New Zealand in 2005, but I wasn't really into craft beer as such until about '08 ish, '09, and so I think they gone by that point. But they are one of those breweries that people just talk about with great fondness.
Mm.
Chris O'Leary did some great work there, and and he then went on to Emerson's. He was a good friend of Richard's and worked there for many years. Now out of the industry, of course, but yeah. So Limburg's an interesting story because the batch when they came and Craig started that brand, he kind of leant back into the Limburg recipes, which was,
Mm.
you know, and it's almost like they were ahead of their time, you know.
Yeah, and there was a little bit of the aesthetic I saw come through from Limburg days. That it appeared to be like there was a bit of a harking back to
Mm, mm,
that.
yeah, yeah. But anyway, they've been around for a long time now. Batch proven that the contract brewing model is sustainable, which is
Mm.
we talk about as well. And anyway, I'm I'm telling you everything that's in it. You should probably leave something for people to listen to. So, so without further ado, we'll cross over to my chat with Craig Cooper from Batch Brewing. Craig Cooper, welcome to the Third Pint Theory. It's an absolute pleasure to have you here.
Hello, Michael, and great to be on the podcast. Yeah.
Yeah. You were on our list, our get list, very early in the piece. So it's taken a little bit of wrangling to get you on, but it's going to coincide with Dry July, which is probably not a bad thing given the bulk of the beers you do these days.
Yeah, well, the timing is good. And I'm sorry it's been so difficult to tie down. I guess summer got in the way, probably is a part of the excuse.
Yeah, yeah. Hey, I thought, I mean, a lot of listeners or people who are watching it on video will know who Batch Brewing are, and with your great artwork, they'll be familiar with that, and we'll talk about that later. But I thought you've got a really long history in the beer industry, and I just wondered if you could sort of talk us through a little bit of that. Like, basically, how did you get started in it?
Yeah, well, actually, I pondered this morning while I was driving between meetings, and I'm going to really age myself by even admitting to this, but I've just ticked over 38 years in the liquor industry, which is a fairly decent run. I obviously enjoy it. It's in my blood.
Yeah.
With the name Cooper, I guess I'm a barrel maker of some repute in the lineage. No, I started coming out of uni. I'd majored in marketing, and I saw a job advertised with Lion, a marketing graduate trainee, and it looked like the perfect job to me for any student, I guess. So that was the beginning of my career in liquor, and I roughly spent a third of the time, maybe it's becoming a bit less, but with Lion over 9 years in various marketing roles in Australia or New Zealand and Australia. And then I moved broadly across into the spirits business with a little bit of wine, and worked in Australia and internationally out of Amsterdam over about 8 years. And then I ran Independent Distillers Canada, which was a subsidiary of Independent Liquor New Zealand for 3 odd years before I came back into beer with CUB in Australia in a GM role. And then 2013, I moved back to New Zealand with my young family, and to get closer to, I don't know, the accessibility of New Zealand, family and friends here, and also with a very distinct mission to set up a craft beer business, which became Batch Brewing. That was 13 years ago. So yeah, I've had a lot of my time in beer. It's all been marketing, sales, general management. In the middle there, and I've glossed over that, but I did buy into the Limburg brewery in Hastings, which Chris O'Leary started in the late 90s. So he's one of the pioneers, along with the Carl Vastas at Tuatara, and Richard Emerson, of course. But I bought into Limburg, and this was 2005, and stuck with that for 3 odd years. This was the infancy of craft beer in New Zealand.
Yes.
I mean, we were primarily supported by wineries in Hawke's Bay, who the winemakers loved the wheat beer range that we, the wit beers, the Weiss beers. They loved drinking our beer, and it got into the restaurants, and but it was very difficult getting beer, beyond there, because there just wasn't really a market for it, and it was extremely expensive. So after 3 years, I thought, this is an expensive hobby.
Yeah.
The money I'd made on subdividing a residential property basically paid for my experiment in craft beer. But it was a lot of fun, and clearly enough fun that another 5 years later, I couldn't leave it alone, so I moved back to New Zealand, and thus Bach Brewing was born. And I think, we're probably craft beer people who start craft beer businesses are just like any entrepreneur. You have to have an element of madness and braveness to take the plunge and give up, what are very regular monthly salaries, or however the money comes in, to, it being a bit lumpy, and doesn't always go exactly according to plan. But here I am 13 years later, and there's
Yeah.
been a lot of change over that period.
I wouldn't mind just rounding back to Limburg for a minute. So were
Yeah,
you overseas when you bought into that?
it was. Yeah, I was living and working in Amsterdam as global sales director for a joint venture business called Maxim between Absolute, Famous Grouse, Jim Beam, and Rui Cointreau, which was, a pretty amazing job, to be fair. We operated across 35 countries, which I got to visit not all of them, but our major markets. And I was home for a major birthday in Hawke's Bay, which is where I come from. Very proudly, Bear Island is on our labels.
Yeah.
And I met Chris O'Leary while I was home, and anyway, I was so fascinated with his beer range that, by coincidence or not, was these wonderful wit beers that come from Belgium or parts of southern Netherlands. And I thought, gee, this is pretty awesome. And one thing led to another, and I very quickly agreed to invest in the business. And by the time I'd returned to Amsterdam, I'm thinking, I think I could move back to Hawke's Bay and get back to the beautiful, lifestyle of the Bay. So I very quickly, possibly, in retrospect, might have been a bit rash. I jumped on a plane, came back, and got boots and all involved in the business. And it was a massive learning experience, both from business and also, in a market that wasn't really happening yet.
Yeah. And a little bit, Limburg, they were kind of ahead of their time. Like in particular, I'm thinking, say, the Hop Rocker,
Hop Smacker. Hop
Hop
Smacker.
Smacker, Hop
Yeah.
and the Hop Rockers mats.
That's right. We were first in the market with a hop name.
Yeah, yeah. And also I mean, it predated my time in craft beer, but
Yep.
the legend of it is there, and it won numerous awards, and sort of around the same time as Epic Pale Ale, I'm guessing, and Emerson's had an American Pale Ale, but
Yep.
they were few and far between at that point, really, weren't they?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, yeah, it's hard to believe Hop Smacker was a pale ale, but probably in those days and in today's terms, it would be IPA, like hop strength and hop aroma. And it was primarily featured Rewalker, and that beautiful passion fruit character that has, thankfully, there's more Rewalker out in the market now, less of the diesel character, which the Americans love. But I'm a passion fruit fan in Rewalker, and that's what we prefer to use in our beers today. But that was the signature of Hop Smacker. And it really was. I mean, without being immodest, it won the accolades, and it was a stunning beer. It'd be kind of interesting to see, what it was like today.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And there's a sort of a connection there when you came back and decided to have a go with batch. And I sort of talk a little bit about the genesis of that, but
Yep.
you reincarnated that beer initially.
Yeah. We did, yeah. We brought it back, dialed up, but still as a pale ale. And yeah, again, retrospect's a wonderful thing. Perhaps I was, a little bit hung up on the nostalgia of the Limburg days, but we had to start somewhere, and it was still an amazing beer. It wasn't big enough. The market had moved to, very much West Coast IPA, and in my view, they probably weren't very balanced. They were overly bitter, but that's where the market was in 2013.
Mm.
We also launched Checkmate, which was a Bohemian Pilsner style that, in its day, won gold medals and trophies, built on the Pilsner Urquell style.
Yeah.
I still think that's a fantastic beer, and we've had some very close iterations in the last 13 years because it's a style I like, and we've resurrected it for, if anything, my own selfish summer drinking.
Yeah, the polygamy Pilsner of
Yes, the
summer.
most recent, yes.
Yeah, yeah. So when you decided to have a go with batch, what did you have the name? Did you have an idea of what it was going to be? And then how did the artwork in particular feed into that? And I guess your relationship with Donovan Bixley, who's the illustrator. How did that? How did it unfold?
Well, it unfolded sometime over 14 years living outside of New Zealand, Australia, Canada, and Europe. I had this outside looking in view of New Zealand and many different levels, but one of them was, this nostalgia and beautiful memories of the coastal lifestyle of going to my grandparents' batch at Mahia and mates' batches at Waimarama Beach and Hawke's Bay and just up north, all these wonderful places that I think sometimes you can take for granted when you're living here, but that's what I missed the most. And maybe living in landlocked Calgary in Canada, where we just had rivers and lakes a little bit further away, but I missed that, being able to go to the seaside, and that really resonated with me and how I wanted to, I think, build a brand. And so it was about the coast and the quintessential Kiwi batch represented that, as much as camping does as well. But the batch was something to hang a hat on, and that's where the name started. And I had considered using Limburg as resurrecting that, but one of the things that we got constant feedback was people were confused that it was a German beer or European, and I wanted to avoid that. The funny thing was, though, because we were living in Melbourne at the time, the first Australian I showed the batch name to, they've gone, "Oh, Bach Brewing." I've gone, okay, brilliant. Anyway,
If you don't export it, you'll be fine. Yeah.
No, that's right. We'll get beyond that. So anyway, I'd considered, given my background, with big corporate brewers and so forth, I'd considered going to one of the, call them the Queen Street advertising agencies, and I don't know, their reception to this, I thought wonderful brief I'd put together about, the vision for the brand. It was quite, I don't know, they weren't that interested, and I could see this was going to end up with them creating an idea that was completely different. And on my way back to Melbourne, I picked up a book from the bookshop called Wheels on the Bus, which is that old story, but illustrated by a guy named Donovan Bixley. And I arrived back in Melbourne, and my then 2-year-old Thompson, I was reading this book to him and looking at these illustrations, and just suddenly the penny dropped, and I've gone, oh, wow, these illustrations are absolutely amazing. it's
Mm.
just captured that essence of New Zealand. Oh, I wonder whether this guy, would consider designing our labels. Anyway, I got online and sent an email off to Donovan, and I don't know why I thought he might have been a teetotaler, or a bizarre thing to think, but I just thought it was almost too good to be true, and said, would he be interested in considering doing a beer label, blah, blah, blah. And rather than, him saying, send us a brief, he came back to me with a whole bunch of work that he's done in oils and watercolors of beach scenes, and a favorite place that he spent his childhood, and really selling me on his capability. And I thought, wow, this is quite impressive. Good start. And anyway, we didn't meet for another six months in person. We did it all by phone and email. Wasn't even Zoom then, 13 years ago. And he said about creating a bunch of different. I had a vision of you arriving at the beach, coming over the hill. There you are. The beach is beautiful. You've arrived on holiday, and that was essentially the nuts of the brief, with a big putukawa tree, and the batch was there. And we set about getting the scene right first, and then we built the brand around this full label beach scene. And Donovan and I, still work closely together today. I mean, I might only see him a handful of times a year when I'm either passing through Taupo on my way to Hawke's Bay. But we have a really tight relationship. I give him enough detail in our briefs to get him going, and he uses his creative license. And he really is an artist. He's not just a graphic designer. I mean, he plays the saxophone, he acts. He's a really cool guy. Yeah.
That's fascinating. From kids' books to beer, I can understand why you may have initially thought that it might not cross that divide.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's a couple of things that sort of come, or that move together, I think, with Batch. And one of it is that you introduced your hopster character. If I've given him his right name.
Yes.
Yeah. The hipster surfer green guy who now is front and center of your labels, often with a beer in hand.
Yeah.
But this, I'd like to know why he came into it, in terms of, you could say he's disrupting this beautiful scene, but he's also adding to it. So how the beers have changed as that look has changed, because I think you've left a few beers by the wayside and maybe become a little bit more focused. Would that be fair?
Yeah, I think that's absolutely fair. So yeah, he's the hopped beeb hipster, called the hopster in our world. How it came about is, it was probably just before COVID erupted in this country, that I spoke to an old mate of mine, who a guy named Steve Bayless, who is a real marketing guru and a big beer guy that he loves the whole beer. I wanted to get some feedback on where our brand was at, because we started with these very visual labels and very colourful, but of course everyone else has seen the opportunity to do similar, and we were getting a bit lost again in retail space. And you've got to scream out. We don't have a whole lot of money to throw on advertising and marketing, so our label is that. And anyway, I mean, he, to cut a long story short, he said, "Coops, look, I love your labels, but they're a bit fucking boring and a bit corporate." And he goes, and I go, "Oh, yeah, okay. Well, I was hoping you'd tell me straight." And he came up with this crazy sort of zombie-esque type character, and some crazy ideas that I was a little bit affronted, I'd have to say, but I thought, well, I'd asked him for feedback, and I've now got to do something with it. And I went away and I took what he'd suggested, and I developed it further and tied it back closer to the beer culture of the time, which is very much about hairy-faced hipsters I'm one of the few clean-shaven beer people around. Luke Nicholas used to be the other one, but he's hairier than anyone at the moment. And anyway, so we started with Hop Smacked was the first iteration of this new Hopster character, and the whole idea was to be a bit more irreverent and have a bit more attitude and punch outside the boundaries and without unwittingly, I'd been anchored perhaps in a bit of my corporate past, which is, is very controlled and there's boundaries and whatever. And I needed that, real boot up the butt to go, okay, let's have some more fun with this. And so the Hopster enabled that, where we got away from being formulaic and just come up with any crazy idea. And it was really, well, it was invigorating and liberating all at the same time. And people do say, oh, how do you come up with these ideas? I mean, I don't know whether they think I'm on drugs or whatever, but I'm not. I just, sometimes things pop into my head. I've got, youngish kids who they have, crazy ideas that don't necessarily relate to beer, but it gives me an idea. And I have a very long list of concepts that I sometimes write down on my phone, or sometimes they pop into my head.
Yeah.
On the day that we're under pressure to have a new one. And Donovan, builds on it. But and the beer and sometimes the beer leads the name and the idea on concept on the label, and sometimes it could be the other way around. Again, we haven't got too stuck, and it has to be this step-by-step approach. And sometimes, sometimes it's better than others. That happens. Sometimes, Super Juice is one that it's stood the test of time, and it's just perhaps the right name and the right idea.
Yeah, in that context, and before we move on to the all-day non-alc beers, you had a core range originally, but you don't really have a core range as such now, do you? Except, trying to think, Super Juice is one that stays around, but there's quite a lot of turnover in the product. That's whatever's on the shelf at the time. It always seems to be new. You don't have much to fall, and you don't have that core range as such.
No, well, not in our alcoholic beer range. Super Juice is essentially it. There have been some beers that have stuck around for 2 or 3 years, along the way, but that changed. Was it 5 or 6 years ago? And this is one of the things, we contract outsource to Steam Brewing as our brewing partner for the whole 13 years. I think we've used a couple of other breweries. Driftwood was kegs were brewed at Sunshine and Gisborne for a while, and Joe Wood at Liberty did a one-off batch for us. But Steam has been our formidable brewing partner, and we have a really tight relationship with them. But that model means that there's some manufacturer margin that we don't have to play with, and that makes it very challenging in 6-packs. And we got to a point where our price points were going to be too high to be competitive, and we tried, nudging them up, but volume was going down as it was. So we made a decision to not do any 6-packs in the alcoholic beer range. So it's only been 440s, and that market is very heavily linked to people drinking stuff seasonally, and or even only once. The untapped group who only have a beer once because they want to keep their numbers going, and that's just the way the market is. So we're working with the market. That's how that sort of happened. But I suppose our core range has become our non-alcoholic range, and it is core.
Yeah, and we'll talk a little bit more about Steam and contract brewing. Off the back of maybe talking about the all-day range, because I think Steam have been very important in the evolution and development of that. But I'm really curious to know, so that for people who have forgotten or don't know, that that you guys were, or you were the first craft brand into that non-alcoholic space at a
Yes.
time where it was, it was only just starting to get some traction. Where the Heineken started to appear more frequently. And I just wonder, like, did you go into that with a great deal of excitement about what was possible, or a whole lot of fear about what could go wrong because it was very untested at that point?
Yeah, a bit of all those things, Michael. I'd been watching the non-alc market in Europe for some time, because I've got a good mate who's a shareholder in Batch. He's the other minor shareholder, and he stopped drinking beer about 15 years ago, and so he's never had a batch alcoholic beer, and he was always banging on at me about non-alcs, and so that stimulated me to be keeping an eye on it. We talked about bringing in some European non-alcs, but I was watching the growth of the market in Europe and particularly Spain, and then I noticed some growth in Australia and the US. And so it was kind of on the radar. But what motivated me was a very personal experience where I was the nominated driver, and I'd picked up a 6-pack of a European non-alc beer. It doesn't matter which one it was, but it was dreadful. It tasted like unfinished wort, unfermented wort. And I thought, well, you must be able to do something better than that. And thus was born the brief to go, well, I think now's the time. It incented me to go, let's have a crack at it. And, with the brief being, it cannot taste like wort. That is the first gate. And so, was there any fear? Not at that point. It was just, well, let's have a crack, and we'll go into pilot testing, which, to be fair, we don't do with any of our 440 ml beers. We go straight into commercial brewing. So this was the first time we'd done a pilot approach, and we worked on that over about 4 or 5 months. We cracked the wort thing to begin with, and then we were trying to get the alcohol down to below 0.5. And we were playing with the hops, and we thought, okay, we're ready. And then we went to commercial, and this is where I suppose some of the fear and trepidation came in, because then you're dealing with some more serious money. And the first commercial batch, and this might have been documented before, but we went to 5,000 litres and thinking, well, we've nailed the pilots, that this can't be too hard. And I don't know, something went wrong, and we ended up with I'll use the word violently bitter beer, but violently bitter for a non-alc, and we had to tip that one. That went down the drain. So it was then it's sort of doubling down, and but we figured out what had gone wrong, and anyway, we were able to rebrew with a little bit more confidence that this was going to be fine, and then we got out into the market, and Garage had a beer that they were testing out there, and they were, I don't know, giving away, I think, via their website. So, but they hadn't gone commercial with it. And I knew that there was a very small window that there was going to be some movement, but no idea to the scale or where it was going to go. Just like everything else, let's do something, a bit different, or similar with a risk on the branding or whatever it may be. And so from that point of view, it was no different. And we were first commercial into the market, and shortly followed by Sawmill and then Garage. But there were, issues for various one of those brands, including supply shortages. So we had a bit of a leg up going into the height of summer with full supply, plenty of stock, and it just took off. And within 6 months, it doubled our business. It was phenomenal. I just, couldn't believe it. And to this day, it's half of our business still.
Yeah. The I think timing's a lot of it. But how much does first to market matter in this scenario? Because in some ways, you're leading the customers on a journey, because no one had the kind of beer you were delivering at that point, really.
Yeah. Well, it matters because you're first in some people's mouths, those opinion leaders, those leaders, and experimenting, do adopt brand, and they'll rationalize it to, well, I like the flavor. But there's a lot of brand in it as well, that they get comfort with the brand. So yes, it matters. It doesn't guarantee ongoing success, because you've got to keep pace with the market, and it's not just the consumer that's there. There's the trade in the middle that also determine who goes on shelf, and who's got money to pay for shelf and promotion, and like all categories that are in strong growth, everyone's becoming attracted, including the big brewers who have formidable resources and the ability to be able to price down. And so 4.5 years later, there's a lot more brands in the marketplace, and our share of the category has diminished over that time. And we've all suffered from the recession of the last couple of years, but and there's pressure on price. I mean, we're not going down, but retail price hasn't gone up in 4.5 years, which is quite unusual in the inflationary environment we've been. And promotion is becoming, so discounting down is becoming more and more. So, it's got the squeeze on it. And really comes down to continuing to innovate. We're not just, one of the things I've realized from the day we launched is that we're in part in the craft beer space, but a big part of it is not. And you can kind of tell that from the ratings on Untapped, for the size and scale of our non-alc beers. I mean, the ratings are, numbers of ratings are quite low. So there are a different group of consumers that are, they're after the non-alc as the priority. They want something with better flavour, and that's those are the motivators.
Yeah. And that's an interesting part of it, because as you say, it's outside a craft space and it's just into a broader consumer space.
Yeah.
But within that, I'm still, I know you talk about Untapped, and there are people that don't care about Untapped, but I think for maybe a speciality beer like a non-alcoholic, if people are going in there to look for, okay, what do other people think is the best? It is sort of important, is it? I guess it's like a Google review in some ways. It's
yeah, well, maybe. I mean, I don't know how many people go in there to look to see what's the best. I mean, there's lots of, information points you can, you can Google, and, major competition awards could come up.
Yeah, well, I was going to get to that.
Yeah. And in our world, yes, we care about Untapped. It's not necessarily the overall rating. I mean, if it was a bomber, then I'd be really concerned. But I get a lot of value out of the comments.
Yes,
and that they're both good, bad, and indifferent, where you pick up stuff and you go, okay, there might be a good point there, even the negative ones as well. More than the absolute ratings. And of course, the bigger and the more ratings you get, the averages can diminish. And I have been amused by some of our competitors who claim to be the highest rating beer, non-alcoholic beer in Untapped, and they've got 20 ratings, and you kind of go, okay, well, it's I could get 20 of my mates to work in some ratings too.
It's a fair point. And I do think that's why their algorithm demands that you have a certain number, to get ranked in various categories. But aside from Untapped, the awards that your non-alcoholic beers have picked up are just fantastic. Like almost every competition, I think one of them, I might be exaggerating, gets a gold medal, or a top 25 or a top 30 in New World. But most recently, I think probably the highest accolade for all day hazy with the trophy for the best non-alcoholic beer at the Australian International Beer Awards. That must have been incredibly satisfying.
Yeah, it was. It was, yeah, it was amazing. I mean, and to get any trophy in Australia is, I mean, in my view, that's the toughest competition we have in our part of the world. Just by sheer volume of entries in the respective categories, but also the judging pool. It's much larger than it is in New Zealand, and yeah, we so All Day Hazy was gold last year, and that was very satisfying, and to get gold again and then top out with the trophy was absolutely amazing, and that's it's also not to diminish All Day Original. Got a gold and a trophy 4.5 years ago. And it was only fresh out of the blocks. I mean, it had just been launched. I mean, that was, you couldn't have hoped for better then. So they're probably equal in terms of, we've still got it. We're still brewing
Yeah.
really good non-alcoholic beer. And at the end of the day, it's what the punters think out there, and that's the greatest measure of success and how well you're doing. And we keep tinkering and fine tuning, and we will continue to do. We don't think, well, that's it.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I do think the Australian trophy, in particular, that was probably the best looking entry list for a non-alcoholic competition that I've seen in this part of the world, because you had the best breweries from America and Europe and Australia in terms of non-alcs, like the Sierra Nevadas and Boston Brewing and a lot of those German and Dutch entries, and you've come out on top of them. And I'm always saying I think New Zealand non-alc beers are as good as anything in the world, and because I've tried heaps of them. I'm fascinated by this whole part of the industry, and I don't know if everyone in New Zealand believes that the New Zealand craft beers are as good as the rest of the world, but I know you would have tried a lot of them. I mean, I know you're going to say yes, yours are, but it's true, isn't it? We do really well.
Yeah, we do, and we seem to have mastered the art, and I mean, New Zealand non-alc producers, brewers, mastered the art of using hops, in a balanced way, so you're getting the flavour and the aroma without the the ensuing over bitterness. That's what I think we've nailed. There's some, I think there's some very, very good European lager styles that come into the country that, for what they're trying to be, they're very good if you want that sort of bland, very clean, refreshing character. No, and look, some of them I try. I mean, there's the market leading brand in Australia, Heaps Normal. I mean, I'm surprised, how ordinary. Put it out there. I mean, how ordinary it tastes. And yet it's I think an 80 million revenue brand. I mean, it's phenomenal. But there's perhaps the power of being first by a long shot. Yeah, really cool branding, and they've got scale, and they're everywhere. But they don't perform well in judge competitions.
Yeah, yeah. Your point about New Zealand, or not just New Zealand hops, but a lot of New Zealand hops do, I think, lend themselves to non-alcoholic beer because they're lower alpha acid hops by nature. But what's changed in your view in the 5 or so years since you launched them in terms of techniques, either with hops, grain, yeast? I mean, I think all of them have changed, but what's been sort of maybe the most dramatic?
Well, the most dramatic is yeast, using specialty yeasts, because they didn't exist 4.5 years ago. We were using the house strain It's and we'll use the best in all of our non-alcs. I'm not going to tell you which, but it does add considerable cost, and it does, not only does it create some different results that work better with some styles, if you like, than others. It allows some flexibility in terms of the volume you brew and so forth. So that's been the one significant, I could say, because if you, I mean, you should be capable of brewing a non-alc beer with that particular yeast. It's a hell of a lot easier to do. And the other thing, is the development of hops, which, not all of them fall into the 5-year window, but cryo hops and hop oils is also enabling to get a bit more depth. And, again, it's interesting, without naming any names, but there's a reported great innovation in developing a new non-alc beer using cryo and hop oils. Well, it's not that innovative because I'm sure other non-alcs are using it, including us. We just don't scream from the rooftops. We just get on about our business and
Yeah.
they are what they are and people can taste it.
Yeah.
So those would be the two things. I mean, malt, not really. I mean, we might fine tune a little bit, but there's not a lot of malt in non-alc beers. So the fine tuning is quite limited. We've experimented with various things to, improve the head retention and the lacing. I mean, those are the things that are quite challenging with such a low malt component. But yeah, so no, I'd say yeast and hops and look, that's not to say there are other things that are on the horizon. I mean, we've got some innovation coming spring this year that I think will be first in market. But who knows what the other guys are doing?
Oh, I look forward to that.
Yeah.
I would like to just round back to talk about Steam for a little bit, because as you've sort of pointed out, you come from a marketing background.
Yeah.
You've been in the industry for many years. You've seen a lot of things, but you're not the brewer as such.
Yeah.
So you have to rely on the expertise of the guys at Steam. And I just wonder how that works. Like, do you go in and say, I want a beer that's like this, or
yeah.
And how does the relationship work in terms of what they then create and how they tweak things? And do they have license to play around, especially with the non-alcs, to find better ways?
Yeah, well, there's not license to just arbitrarily, but we have a very close. It is a partnership, and it's evolved over 13 years from where it started with more of a here's the recipe to a much more active involvement in building the recipe. It starts with concepts from either me or we build some of them together, and then they'll put the science behind it. Steam are a very highly structured brewery in the sense that most of the guys there have come from big brewers at some point in their careers. So process and systems is very strong, and it's not to say that's not true in others, but that enables, again, to be able to work with. I know what's happening on a brew sheet, and I could literally structure a brew sheet from my desk. But where it's evolved to, and this is about, I think, building partnership and ownership and involvement. And I consider Steam to be part of the batch team, and vice versa, where there's been various people come through Steam over 13 years, and some of the people, like Shane Morley, is still there. He'll be there until till the dark ages. But he and there's other, Chris Ward, Craig Buddle. Simon Farrell. I mean, these guys are awesome in the sense that they are very open to, ideas, concepts that I throw at them, and then they'll build the structure around recipes. They do have license to come up with new ideas, but we have to talk about them before they implement them. And just recently, we're in development for a new beer for spring, and Craig had I won't tell you what it is, but he'd actually, as a bit of an aside, come up with another side idea, a bit of a twist on it, and it's absolutely outstanding. Now, it doesn't fit the original brief, but I'm going, and this is what I love about it. I'm going, okay, we might better do something with that. And so now I'm going to think about, well, what concept can we build around it to utilize that product opportunity, that beer style. So yeah, that's probably a bit ambiguous, but it's
no, that's that. I think that nails it. It's just a really interesting relationship, and I know, we've talked about this in the past, about contract models, and another tenant, I guess, at Steam was Epic, and when they went into liquidation, Luke made a comment, Luke Nicholas, around, that not the contract brewing model might not be that viable anymore. And I think you've touched on this a little bit. It sort of maybe depends whether you're in 6-packs or 440s, but you've obviously been able to make it work and keep making it work for you. And I just wonder if what your take on this contract system is, because I think there's fewer people utilizing it as a way to maybe start a brand these days, whereas it used to be way more common.
Yeah, that's probably driven by perhaps still push on the greater economy in terms of the startups. That's true, but a lot of people don't know that the customer stream that goes into Steam, to pick one. Even I'm surprised, and I go, "Oh, that's interesting." Somebody, brewers from all over New Zealand, Wellington, West Auckland, etc. I go, "Oh, that's fascinating that they popped up." And they might be doing one-offs, or they might be using Steam to brew non-alcs because they pasteurizers, and that's absolutely critical to non-alc beer. So there's some quite a number of non-alc brands at Steam as a result of that. And just on that, I mean, I don't have any concern about secrets from the batch range, because it's not. I've never heard anything about any other person's beer in 13 years I've been there. I mean, Steam are absolutely watertight from that point of view, and high integrity, and I respect them for that. But back to the contract model, you've got to, like all businesses, you've got to go, well, this is my cost, and this is the market that I'm going to. Do the two marry up, or do I need to choose a different market or a different category? And that's what we've done. Is so we've just had to acknowledge that there's pieces that we can't play in, and adjusted our strategy and the direction of our business. But it does work, and the pieces that it's again very easy in your own brewery where you're looking at your overall margin, but what are all the overheads that are feeding out of that, and what's left, and what's the true see-through profit on a per SKU basis. We know that. We know that the day that beer is made. I mean, we have see-through profit apart from the freight component, shipping out to customers, but we have a very live profitability model, and that's a leg up. I mean, it also, unfortunately, when the market is slower and tougher, we can dial back our brewing very, very quickly, and we don't carry the overhead costs for that. So And similarly, we can dial it up very quickly. So that's the benefit of the contract model.
Yeah, yeah, a good summary. Um, we've rapidly come to what I thought might be the end point of this
Yeah.
conversation, time-wise, but there's a lot more that could be said. But
Yeah.
I thought, given and you're talking about, your 38 years in the beer and liquor industry,
Yeah.
you've seen a lot. Are you able to project 2, 3, 5 years down the line about what you think might happen with craft beer, especially?
Yeah. Yeah, if I knew, I wouldn't tell you. But it's just as well I wasn't doing this over a beer, or we'd be here for hours, Michael. I can wax lyrical. Oh, look, I think non-alc lifestyle, call it lifestyle beer, I think is going to continue to evolve and develop. And when we're clearly the greater marketplace, there's a lot of interest in supplements, both in middle-aged people that need to avoid muscle atrophy. Put me into that camp, or my teenage son that seems to believe he needs protein and things to building his abs. So that market is undoubtedly exponential, and non-alc beer, lifestyle beer choices, low carb beers. Who would have believed? I mean, I couldn't have believed we would have such a big part of a healthy lifestyle beverage. 13 years ago, I wouldn't have believed if you'd said half our business would be non-alc. But so I think that category and segment of the market is going to continue to evolve and develop. I'd like to think, like probably a lot of brewers, that we evolve and perhaps get a bit more breadth in our IPAs from all hazy. Let's see some more bright beers. Let's see people drinking more bright. I mean, we can talk up, that we think there's movement, but I don't know, it's not moving that quickly. And I'll keep brewing them for my own personal enjoyment. But they don't sell nearly as fast as a hazy IPA. So, who knows? It's yeah.
Is there room for movement even within the hazies? Like, can they change and evolve? In terms of flavor profiles, or I don't know, presentation.
There might be I think a movement, and perhaps some of that's already happening into lower ABV. So we move from the bulk of hazy being in the 6+ category, maybe to centering more around 5. Where people can drink more of them, after work. And I mean, the other thing that I think is quite possible in that time frame is that I've lived through or worked through the can market, moving to stubbies and glass, and better and better drinking out of bottles to back into cans, and we might see some movement back into bottles possibly.
Okay. Yeah,
it's quite possible in 5 years.
Yeah, is that because of resource, or just because of consumer tastes, or?
It'll be resource driven probably. I mean, it hasn't moved, it's been brewery led, pricing, cost of manufacture led, each of those movements. And there's, they've come up with a good story to tell people that that's how you should have your beverage. Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting.
It's a novelty thing, it's, or what's cool, it's not cool what your dad does, it's cool what your granddad did. It's sort of nostalgia.
Everything old is new again at some point.
Yeah. So, maybe that's what we should all be doing, what was,
Yeah. Just, you have to prep the supermarkets to change the shelves again, but
yeah.
So, I mean, they love the cans because they sit so nicely, don't they? But yeah. So.
Oh, look, I love the cans too from a transport freight point of view. I mean, we have virtually no breakages. and they're just lighter, and everything about them is, more compact, and they keep light out, all the good stuff. Yeah.
So why would you go back to a bottle? Just aesthetics, maybe.
Yeah, it's different. It's novel. Maybe somebody goes, "Oh, do you remember the days we did used to sit around drinking out of a bottle?" There's a novelty to that. It's
Yeah, yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. And everyone will have to go and find their bottle openers again that they've
Yeah,
carried out the back of a
exactly.
drawer. It's
Well, I can still open a bottle with another bottle, so I'll be okay.
yeah. Same. Just
Yeah,
don't
there
go
you
back
go.
to it with your teeth.
That's a great skill. I mean,
It is. Hey, Craig, look, it's been brilliant, actually. Really nice chat. Really good information, and yeah, continue making those brilliant non-alc beers. And I look forward to whatever the future holds this spring. It's
yeah,
sounds interesting.
I've set myself up now. Dictate. Yeah,
You've just
things the end of
gone,
time, so you've lured me in somehow. Yeah.
you just froze there. What were you saying? Sorry.
I said you've lured me into giving up, forward secrets when I never normally talk about what's coming.
All right. Well,
All right.
yeah. Everyone
Thank
just
you, Mike.
yeah.
Good.
All right, Martin Bridges. Did that
Mm.
inspire you to give Dry July a try?
No. Not because there aren't a range of excellent non-alcoholic beers available, and I do enjoy trying them, and I always have. There's always 2 or 3 different ones in my fridge, but there are so many other beers that I want to try during July. There's all the Smith's IPA Challenge beers that will be around. There will be the Malt House West Coast IPA Challenge will be happening, and there will be beers released out of that. There are so many beers that I want to try, not for any alcohol-related reasons, but for the flavors.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think, unfortunately, not this year.
No. Well, I'll tell you a story, and it's a true story. So the other night, I was so Grant Caunter from State of Play sent me a few beers, and one of them was his chocolate stout. So it's a 0 alcohol chocolate stout. And when it was first released, I had a little bit, it had some flavor, but my critique was that it was just really sweet, tasted like Coca-Cola, didn't have a head retention, and they went back and, as he said, we worked on it. And he said, try it again. It doesn't taste like Coca-Cola. No. Anyway, so yes, it has a really lovely frothy head again now, and a little bit more robustness maybe, and a bit of bitterness, and it's really nice. It's a spiced chocolate stout. Anyway, I had one. I thought, yep, fair dues, good beer. And then I was in a mood for a real stout, and so I will not say whose stout this was, but I went to the fridge, about 5% stout from a well-known brewery, and I poured it, and I just thought, it hasn't got as much flavour as that non-alcoholic one that I just tried.
Wow.
And I'm not making that up. Bizarrely, and I mean, it was a spiced chocolate stout, so it's got a bit going on. But, I thought that's an interesting, it made me pause and think about, if I'm getting a good enough wow factor from a 0%er, do I really need the flavour from a full alcohol one? It was just an interesting mind fuck, really.
Very interesting. I think the thing that one of the other things that stays with me from that interview with Craig was this kind of the functional drinks is the new thing. So not just the zero alc, but the low carb and the gluten frees and
Yes.
that this as a major increasing category, and I think I am really impressed with where they're all going in those areas.
I mean, I did get a call the other day from a mainstream journalist who wanted to talk about sort of the craft beer industry, but I turned down this interview. I said no one wants to hear any more from me, which is true. But he was sort of couldn't understand how Spates Summit low carb ultra, or whatever they call it, Spates Summit ultra low carb beer, could be the best selling beer in New Zealand. And it was just like, you've got to get out more. Low carb's a huge thing. It's it's a massive part of the industry, and it's a really it's sort of the domain of big beer, but it is a space that craft breweries can play in, and they can maybe push things a little bit in, the way Urban would have done with Copacabana. Like, it's low carb, but yes, it's 7% IPA, So there are, I think the functional beers are a really interesting category. And people obviously want them. I don't think we're going to see things like vitamin beer anytime soon. And
certainly, I don't think so. It does seem to be a thing elsewhere. But
well, I think it's happening in the non-alc.
Do we get protein?
Yeah, no. But I do think a non-alc beer, sort of juiced up, if you like, to resemble a sports drink is like, I don't think you could market it in New Zealand because you couldn't talk about, even though it's a zero alcohol, I don't think you'd be allowed to talk about the benefits of it. But there are things like this overseas. So it is a crazy era we live in, where, and I do think there's a push to make people understand that beer is, the fight back, if you like, against a modern kind of temperance movement. That beer is not bad for you. There are some good things about it, and that is happening to an extent. But yeah, the rules here in New Zealand mean you can't talk about it. You and I can.
Yes, we can, but brewers cannot.
Yeah.
But no, I think it's there was some great stuff. Craig's an intelligent and a well-travelled man. He's been involved in various aspects of the New Zealand beer industry, and here he is blazing a trail to the future.
Yeah, and he did drop a hint that come September there is something interesting happening. So he wouldn't even off air. He wouldn't give me anything more. So we'll stay posted for that. It's who knows what's next in this industry, Martin. I really don't. But
don't ask me. I'm useless at predictions.
Hey, look, we've bloody waffled well over our time limit. So thank you, and I think we'll be talking about kind of functional beer again next time, because we'll probably talk about your Auckland Beer Week event where you're doing an ice cream and beer matching, but with gluten-free beer.
Absolutely, yes. We're going to leave you leave them dangling about that, but we can talk about that next time.
Yeah, no, I'm looking forward to hearing about how it's going to work, and more about Auckland Beer Week, of course, because we'll have Marie Shaw, the organizer of Auckland Beer Week. She's a bit of a Wonder Woman, so I think that'll be a great interview. So I look forward to that. Until then, thank you, listeners, and thank you, Martin.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Third Pint Theory is recorded, edited, and produced by myself, Michael Donaldson, and Martin Bridges, the Beer Bigwig. You can find past episodes on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and all the other podcast platforms.
If you've enjoyed this episode, remember to subscribe so you never miss an episode. And please leave us a comment or rating. It really helps other beer lovers find the show. You can also find us on socials. We're third.pint.theory on Instagram and at thirdpinttheory.bsky.social on Blue Sky.
Don't forget to check out what we're up to outside the podcast. You can read my latest articles, reviews, and news in the Pursuit of Hoppiness magazine at hoppiness.co.nz. Plus, you can sign up to my weekly beer news email, Friday Night Beers, at hoppiness.substack.com.
And if you're a brewery, bar, or restaurant owner looking for help with making the most out of craft beer, you can get in touch with me at martin.bridges@beerbigwig.com. I can help you with beer lists, events, tastings, or other ways to help you make better beer decisions.
Finally, if you're interested in sponsoring the podcast or advertising, or you had any other suggestions or questions, drop me an email at michael@hoppiness.co.nz.
Until next time, keep your glass full and your hops fresh. Ka kite anō.